So talking the talk or learning how to speak a little bit of Revit. So this is my Revit 101 for CAD folks. The one thing that you guys are probably familiar with is our templates, our drawing templates in AutoCAD. Now they're used a little bit different, and they're typically set up in AutoCAD so that when you start a brand new drawing from scratch, your template's already there, or you use Content Browser or some method to bring in your styles, your layers, and all that stuff in your Revit, in your AutoCAD projects. Well, in Revit, it's similar, but you have to understand that if for most people for me early on with AutoCAD, I was self-taught, and then I got some formal training. With Revit users, I see a lot of this in the industry right now. There's a lot of self-taught AutoCADers that try to self-teach Revit. And the problem with that is that it's not that you can't see the similarities for most users. It's just that there are some techniques and workflows that need to be understood first before you get into the projects and before you jump in 2 feet. And we'll talk about that again a little bit throughout this session. We'll talk about some what I call sketch mode in my first day or first hour in Revit. Some questions that I asked. There's no layers. There's no command line in for you AutoCADers, right? And then of course the question that I get all the time is you can't save to a previous version. There's some information online to tell you why. It's a pretty decent explanation. Now, for you guys that are AutoCADers, the big thing is that then one of the questions that we had early on before the webinar started was for drafters and detailers. And I'll tell you this, I'm a drafter by trade, and one thing that was very hard for me early on to pick up was to 3D visualize, right? When I was working in architecture, you can't teach that to people. You have to have that knack or that skill in order for you to be effective, because you're designing 3-dimensionally on a 2D surface, right? You're just throwing things down on a drawing or a sheet of paper. So you basically take a 3D model and make it 2D. In Revit, you design in any form, in both 2D or 3D, and you get what you get. It's a 3D model. You're building it. So kind of like with you guys that went to school for architecture, you're building cardboard, glue, and popsicle sticks to build your models. That's what you're doing in Revit. You're building a model, and you're using the program to manage it and to utilize or to visualize it in 2D and 3 dimensions. There's a lot of built-in procedures or built-in features in Revit that kind of are better or superior than AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, you have Sheet Set Manager and Project Navigator. That was later on in my later AutoCAD experience, but I still work for firms where everything was done in model space. Everything's done. People don't even use paper space, model space, or not even using XREFs, right? In Revit, it's kind of all built in, so you don't have to figure out, well, which is the best workflow. You kind of, again, get focused more on design rather than drafting. So for you guys that are drafters, this strengthens your game. It makes you a better designer because of the fact that you actually can visualize and see what you're designing rather than just drawing symbology on a piece of paper. And I'll show you that here in a second. I'll demonstrate all this in Revit to get some pics and clicks and get you guys some Revit exposure as well, not just slides. So it's not going to be death by PowerPoint today. One thing about any program or any software implementation for you guys that are maybe struggling to kind of figure out how you're going to make the transition, right, is to understand the language. Just like anything else, if you don't understand the language, if I was teaching you guys speaking in a foreign language, you guys might be polite and smile and nod your head yes, and like you understood, and then kind of roll your eyes and be like, man, I don't even know what that guy's talking about. Well, it's the same thing for Revit. Like for you guys that are AutoCADers, the example that I use is, if you went on the street and you told, people asked you what you did for a living, and and you told them you worked with AutoCAD and you worked with layers, XREFs, and blocks, they'd look at you like, AutoCAD, are you a mechanic? Thinking that because you work with AutoCAD, that you might be a mechanic, right, or something like that. It's all about terminology and communication. So one way for you guys that are going to be transitioning into Revit is to understand, to shorten the learning curve. First, you need to get buy-in from the top down. You need to accept, Revit is the way it's going to be or go. Second, practice and get some training, because that's going to really help you understand how to take your current processes and workflow and translate those into this new process. And then of course understand the terminology. Once you learn all this, then you'll be able to communicate your own concerns or questions, and all of that can be kind of dealt with, right? Then that's where support comes in. You have a support team like us, you have in-house gurus or in-house support, BIM managers, CAD managers, all of that can be utilized, that data, right? When we're learning the language, and this is kind of something that I talk about in my training courses, for all my training really, for most Revit courses, because everybody, or most 9 out of 10 students in my class are CAD users, or coming from CAD in some sort. There's some terms that I always written down in my class training on the marker board, and I ended up putting them into slides so that I can convey this information consistently to all my training classes, to give everybody kind of a list of terminology, right? Definitions, something as simple as this by your computer, printed out and stuck on your partition with a thumbtack, so that you can look at these and understand the terms and remember what questions to ask. So you can ask Bob or Mike and say, hey, where are the units again? This thing is in metric and we're supposed to be in imperial. What we do units in AutoCAD, well, where is that in Revit? It's project units, and you can search for it and check it out, right? So there's a couple of slides in here that I put in this show, or in this presentation, that has some terminology that I share with you guys. Again, everything is going to be on the YouTube, right, video, so you can go look at the video, pause it, and take notes, or screen grab